6 p.m. Dubai time. This is Ali Azzeddin from Fourth Generation for Education. And I can see some people, they've been with me since 9 a.m. in the morning. Hello, Mona. Mona is watching from Lebanon. We have Asma from Kuwait. We have Iman from Saudi Arabia. We have people in Indonesia, Switzerland, again, KSA, Indonesia, and many other countries, US. So it's early morning for them now. I have people from India. So welcome everyone. This is our back to school day. We took July as a month of break and we are back. Plenty of events for you. We are preparing them. Caroline is watching from Uzbekistan. Hello, Caroline. And then I'm so excited to have Wendy with me. And let me tell you a little bit of how I contacted Wendy. I had her book and then I read the book. And then I said, okay, I'm going to contact Wendy and then let's see if she will reply. She will reply and then I will collaborate with her. And then if my email will be ignored, I just enjoyed reading the book. And so I emailed Wendy and then Wendy replied and she said, yes, Ali, I will be excited to be with you. It's very early on her side. Good morning, Wendy.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to learn from you now in a kind of a face-to-face virtual session. I know it's a very short time, but I know that all the attendees today, they will gain plenty of information and plenty of idea how we can create a culture of curiosity. So let's explore this together. And I will be here facilitating the chat, asking you some question and checking our people on Facebook, because I know many people, they join the page live on Facebook. So we're ready to give it a start. Let's go.
Okay. Thank you so much for welcoming me. It is such an honor for me to be here with all of you all over the world, and for what I hope is a sharing of ideas and putting our minds together for all of the exciting things that we can take about the research on how children learn and translate that into a classroom culture of curiosity. So my name is Wendy Ostroff, and I'll tell you about myself in just a second.
We're going to remind them that in the chat, we are going to interact. Make sure you're putting everyone. And so everyone will be able to read your comment. If you are just sending that chat to host and panelists, it will be only me and Wendy who are going to read your answers. So.
Yes, so I'm excited to hear what people have to say. And as ideas come to you, please, let's interact and just start this as the beginning of a conversation. I'm an applied developmental and cognitive psychologist, and I'm a professor at Sonoma State University in California in the US. And I train future teachers there, but we use a very innovative approach where we flatten the hierarchy in our classroom. So every voice has the same meaning, and every voice is taken with the same respect, and we create knowledge together. I've written a couple of books, and one is on curiosity, and so that's something that I'm passionate about. I also do professional development workshops, and mostly just love to work with, get to know teachers, and work on the future of an innovative education. So some guiding questions for this event today are going to be, do we teach based on how children learn? So let's look at how children learn, what we know from the science, and see if we can align our teaching with that. Because in some cases, we've been doing things out of tradition or habit, and those things can be really wonderful as well. But we have so much new information about how children learn that we can integrate in. How does curiosity impact the brain? What would a curiosity classroom look like? And how do teachers impact kids' curiosity? So what if the way we teach is not necessarily aligned with the best way that kids learn? And we know that children are endlessly curious and exploring their worlds. So today I'm going to share some powerful research on humans as exquisite learners, that we are set up and we develop and grow all in the function of learning, and that curiosity is the drive that brings us to learning. So we're going to look at some studies, some classic sort of studies that have been around for many years and some on the cutting edge of science, but somehow many of these haven't yet made their way into the classroom and how we teach. So I think what we should do is take the knowledge we have and really harness that for the best impact for our learners. And in the last 20 years, but especially the last 10 years, we've had massive advances in our understanding of how learning happens. We can actually look and peer inside the brains of children now as they're learning. But a lot of this stuff, as I mentioned, hasn't made its way into the classroom. So it's really important to consider some of these findings when we're designing how we're going to teach and what our curriculum is going to look like. So first off, how does curiosity compel learning? Well, first of all, it jumpstarts intrinsic motivation, the motivation that comes within. We want to know. And when we're dying to know something, when we're so excited to learn as a child, as an adult, nothing can stop us. It makes attention effortless. It makes, it's like a wildfire motivation that comes from the inside. And this is just one example of a research study with 3 and 4-year-olds that develop significantly more knowledge when they're allowed to freely explore with something, with a manipulative, with a toy, rather than being scripted on how to respond to that. Curiosity also releases dopamine in the brain. So that feels great, has a lot of pleasure. There's nothing better than being deeply interested in something, but it also activates the dopaminergic system, which gives us improved noticing. So when you're so interested in something, you notice more about it and you remember more about it, because the hippocampus in the brain, which is a big part of memory, is actually part of that system. So dopamine allows us to take in information more deeply than we would have. So if we look at that reward pathway in the brain, we see that it involves the prefrontal cortex, which is all the place of our critical thinking skills, the self-regulation, the kinds of skills we want kids to use in the classroom, but also activating those deep parts of the brain, the memory areas of the brain and the motivation areas of the brain. So if we can activate this network with curiosity, we're going to have such a better and a deeper learning experience for the children. The other thing we see with curiosity is that curious people show better cognitive skills over time. And then this is just one study where the scientists looked at extra curious 3-year-olds and followed them until they were 11. And those kids were doing far better in their school performance than their matched peers. So if we can encourage children to use their curiosity and hold on to it, because they all have it, if we can encourage them to hold on to it, then we're going to set up these super learners in our schools. So how do we cultivate curiosity? Well, first of all, sometimes there's a worry of what if they don't learn? If we base the classroom on the child instead of our top-down agendas, then there's this thing of, well, what if they don't learn anything? There's sort of a panic that we have to script it so tightly or they won't learn. And there's kind of sometimes some fear-based things around education. So first, I want to just talk about some of the really compelling evidence that children are the best learners. They're super learners, and they're going to learn. They may not always learn what we want them to learn, but they're going to learn always in every situation. So how does curiosity get to learning? How does it forge learning? Well, kids do these things no matter what, and right from birth. They perceive complex patterns. Their sensory systems are set up to take in and focus on complex patterns. They respond to novelty, new things in the environment. They explore, they experiment, and they join communities. They join what's happening in them. And that's a survival mechanism that we've had always for tens of thousands of years of our human evolution. So first, we perceive complex patterns. Infants right from birth are careful noticers. They wonder and explore. They check things out. They tune into relevant information. As soon as the auditory system is functional in infants, they're cracking the code of language. They're trying to understand in utero, they're understanding language. And right from birth, and these studies show that infants are taking statistics on the language stream, understanding sounds that go together. Some sounds are allowed in their native language, some are not. They're tuning in and they're gathering effortlessly. They're doing this incredible learning at all times. And you can tell from the research, when we play sounds for infants in the lab, right away from birth, they can perceive any sound in any language. But over the first year, they tune into only those sounds they need. It's an astonishing skill. They can remember and correctly use 80,000 lexical items by 3 years old. So understanding language is a powerful, their native tongue is one of the most powerful examples of the infant and child as a super learner. We come into the world as a super learner. I've been amazed in my career at how much better children are at learning all things, at learning languages, first and second languages, at learning instruments, at taking in their world. So we can trust that they're going to learn. We don't have to worry if our curriculum isn't exact, that they're not going to learn. In fact, we can free it up a little and give them some space to learn. So the other key ingredient to learning is the community and the surround. So we can count on the brain and the nervous system of the learner, that they're set up for it. But we can also count on the context, that there's a context set up for starting from infancy for learning. So every adult all over the world talks to babies in a very specific way with lots of emotion and lots of ups and downs and high pitch. Well, we use that high pitch because their little cochleas in their ear can perceive high pitch. So it's this symbiotic relationship. The way we behave with kids, the way we get excited when we see little children learning is the way it creates learning in them, and they want to join us and they want to emulate what we're doing. So we talk to them, and all of these things happen effortlessly. We don't have to try to teach babies their native language. They just learn them. And if you look at the sort of symbiosis of the brain, mothers with babies that haven't learned language yet have the highest pitch in their voice, because that's when they need it the most to get. So we adjust to the child, even if we're not aware that we're doing this. The other thing that children do is they respond to novelty. They explore their worlds, they experiment in their worlds. And we can look at ourselves as not so different from other primates, from monkeys. And just a little story is that monkeys are really afraid of snakes. Well, monkeys all over the world are very, very afraid of snakes. And they've actually found a snake-sensitive neurons in the brains of monkeys, and they're more prolific than face-sensitive neurons. So this fear is very profound. But what scientists have found is that if you put a box of snakes in a room with monkeys, they will peek in that box and they'll be scared and they'll jump around and they'll hide, and they'll even hide themselves. But what they do next is really important. And even Charles Darwin wrote about this. They go back. They can't not explore and try to understand and be compelled. So the avoidance urge is superseded by the novelty urge. And we are like that. We want to see, we want to peer in, we want to understand. And children are very much like that. And so the other thing that children do is they join communities and they learn. And in many parts of the world, people have examples of children learning without being explicitly taught, just like we learn language without being explicitly taught. These are hunter-gatherer children in the Congo Basin, and they're using very sharp knives and tools. And sometimes when we see this, we get scared. But for many, many years, these cultures have not taught their children, but just surrounded them in a surround of people using these tools and doing things like animal tracking and hunting and building homes and playing instruments and cooking without being taught, but just being surrounded by people who are doing those things. And there are some radical schools that are doing the same with learning to read. There are children in the world that learn to read in the same way we learned how to talk, which is without instruction, just being around readers in a culture of reading. So we are really set up, and that's the intro to let us know that we don't have to be afraid. that kids are going to learn. And you may have seen these. There's a TED Talk with Dr. Sugata Mitra in India with the hole in the wall. So they gave children these children didn't have access to computers. They just put them in a hole in the wall. And within hours, they had taught themselves the functionality of the computer, with the older children teaching the younger children. And so for thousands of years, we've really learned this way together. So what does it look like on the ground and in schools, and what do we do with curiosity ourselves as educators? Well, one thing is we see curiosity on the ground as children's questions. Questioning is such a powerful tool, an exploratory tool. It lets us gather information. It lets us learn about the world. And in a study with preschoolers, the researchers wired the preschoolers with the recording device. They just put a little apron on in the morning when they got to school, and it recorded everything they said all day. And at the end of the week, they calculated how many questions these preschoolers asked. And they found that they asked, on average, 76 questions per hour. Wow. So these preschoolers were asking everything from the nature of the universe to what's for lunch, a huge range of questioning behaviors. But when it gets a little bit tragic is when you follow those children into primary school. And we see a huge drop off, that by kindergarten, they were only asking 2 to 5 questions per hour. And by grade 5, the questions were almost absent during the school day. So something in the structure, the way we've set up our school day has created this situation where the teachers ask the questions instead of the children. And if we think back to that intrinsic motivation and how important intrinsic motivation is and what that does to the brain, we're really missing an opportunity for curiosity in children with doing it this way. So if you look at when children ask questions, how their questions function, this was a study done with kids trying to work together and collaborate to solve problems. What they found was it was their own questions that really affected their understanding. So even when they worked together as a group, they had to embody their own questions in order to take that knowledge and use it for future problems. And Margaret Mead, the famous anthropologist of old days, said the same. She said that her students remembered only what they said themselves. In a discussion, you have to have your own copy of the information. You really have to take it in and have it yourself. Something really different happens when students ask the questions rather than teachers asking the questions. It ignites their intrinsic motivation. It gets them engaged. It activates the prefrontal cortex of the brain. So people who have lesions in the prefrontal cortex, if they have brain damage, they have a profound impairment of their own original ideas and their own original thoughts. So we need to activate that with the students. And when students ask the questions, it changes the classroom dynamic from top down to bottom up, and it opens up possibilities for them. Now, sometimes we maybe don't want it to be. Sometimes we need to not have it be a chaotic classroom environment, but there are ways to design pedagogy and curriculum which lets students' questions guide what's learned. Also, when students ask the questions, their insights are revealed in real time. So it's not just them sort of getting what they know down, but they actually form what they know in real time. So sometimes these questions are not fully formed, but the act of asking is what creates the complexity and the thinking. So I just, one last thing is just being playful in the world and being exploratory in the world is one of the best problem solving strategies we can use. And there's so much evidence of this. This is a classic study where they had children trying to solve a problem, and the problem was something was stuck in the bottom of a bottle. This is an old chimpanzee study where you have to build a tool. You have materials and you have to build a tool and you have to get something out that's stuck. And in this study, they let half the group just play around with the tools. and the materials to build a tool. And the second group, they gave actual instructions. Here's how you build a tool. You use this tape and use this string and you stick this on the bottom and you stick it in and get the tool. But the crazy thing is that the ones that played solved the problem better than the ones who had instructions. So letting the children be free to play around is so much better for learning. And we have so many examples of that. There was a study with children actually using wheelchairs to navigate obstacle courses. And in those studies, the kids, it was really hard to do, but when they had instruction, they were so much more limited in what they could do. But when they just got to play around with the wheelchairs, they did much better on solving that physical task. There's a recent study I just read about English language learners using certain words in a top-down kind of structured lesson versus just playing with kids, and how much they got out of that free play. So I want to.
Yeah, okay. Before that chat, if you want, because you just mentioned the EAL student, I have a question for you. So how do we support curiosity and questioning when we are teaching an additional language? So I asked our teacher to intentionally teach questioning students. What are your suggestions?
To teach students when we're learning second languages, right?
Yeah.
Because
so they are second language learners, and so how do we support curiosity? Do we teach them implicitly how to teach questions? So any kind of a suggestion?
Right. Well, if we think about any of us who have tried to learn a second language, the immersion is the best way to learn, right? And so for children who are playful and who are exploratory, any kind of just interaction with other children. I keep thinking, especially during COVID, it's like children need other children. Children learn best from other children. Is get them in a situation where the effortlessness is going to be there, because then you light up all those parts of the brain. So instead of sitting down for the lesson, it's, playing with the kids that speak the other language, or having an opportunity to explore something. And so, yes, of course, we need to study things, right? We need to sit down and learn the verbs, but
explicitly.
That's not how we learned our first language.
True. I always refer to this, like if you are a mom or a dad, and then you were talking to your little boy or little girl, and then you told them A, B, C, or do you give them full sentences?
Right. I mean, you just spend time with them, really, is what you do. And you just show emotion and get excited and show them things. I've always thought if people talk to adults the way they talk to children in a foreign country, then we would get it, because they sprinkle it in and they point to things. And I mean, parents and caregivers teach language, really. They just do it with love and emotion and food and and hugs. If you got that in another country, you would pick up the language so easily. But yeah, I wonder if anyone has any imagination of what would a lesson plan look like if it was guided by children's questions. And there are schools doing things like this. It kind of upsets our traditional hierarchy, but if there are any thoughts on that, I would be really interested.
Okay, so while the attendees are answering this question in the chat, imagine a lesson plan guided by children question. What would be the benefits? What would be the challenges? I have another participant, Liz. She's asking us if you can reference and top to structured learning. So the one that you just mentioned. You talked about a study.
I'm sorry, my connection went out. I missed something.
Yeah. So Liz is asking, can we reference again the study about the EAL learners that learn better through play?
Yes, I'm going to send you that study.
Yes.
I was going to find it before the event, and I just read it, and then I don't have it in the references. So I will send that study to you.
So Wendy, just after the webinar, if you email it to me, I will put it in the follow-up link tomorrow for the participants, so they get it via Zoom automatically. Yes. Okay. Absolutely. So now let's read some of the answers in the in the chat. So benefits of a lesson guided by children inquiry is student engagement, agency, self-efficacy, student voice, they are interested, learning is taking place. And so it seems people are insisting on the benefits. I'm not seeing any challenge here or this one. So Natasha is talking about curriculum expectation for that challenge. Are we going to cover the lesson objective? This is again a challenge. What else? Benefits. So we will depend on the learner prior knowledge. And then the challenge, we might go out of the curriculum. We need more time than we have planned. These are some of the ideas, Wendy.
Thank you. Yes. And of course, right. And so we're not necessarily in charge of our own classrooms is one of the problems, right? We have a curriculum that we have to cover. And in many cases, it's imposed on us. We're not necessarily given academic freedom as especially primary educators. There's a state curriculum, there's a national curriculum that we need to follow. So how can we work within those bounds? And I think sometimes it's a matter of scaffolding, and we choose the topic, but we're going to guide it by their questions and finding that balance. But one thing I would say is that when there's a genuine excitement and a genuine motivation on a topic, and we don't go with that, then we're missing a huge opportunity to engage curious children. And again, to give them that kind of brain superhighway to learning. So anytime there's an opportunity, any window in that day when a child is interested and other children are interested, to be able to go with that, I think is the greatest gift that we can give. And we see that in Reggio Emilia education coming from Italy, that they do emergent curriculum. So listening to the children is really important. And knowing the children in your class is really important, knowing their interests. That has to do with class size, right? If you have 50 students, it's going to be much harder to know those students. So if we can advocate for the powers that be, the people in charge, to advocate for smaller classes, to say, I need to know my students, I need to know their interests, because that's how they're going to learn. And that's how they're going to get the best learning. Our own enthusiasm for their topics of interest makes a big difference. And that's something I want to talk about right now. What roles do we play as educators in children's curiosity? We play a huge role in their how they function. First of all, there were the studies way back in the 1960s. These were done here in San Francisco Bay Area, where I live, where the children, you probably know these classic studies, the children were labeled as academic bloomers or not. And it was arbitrary, totally arbitrary, but the teachers thought it was real. And so their implicit bias of those children was they treated the academic bloomers completely differently without realizing. By the end of the school year, the ones who were labeled to be smarter were doing way better. I mean, significantly better on achievement, but also on measures of IQ, which is supposed to be, separate from academic achievement. It's supposed to be your kind of inherent potential. So our biases can really affect children, and that's important to know. If how we respond to their curiosity is going to squash their curiosity, or it's going to allow it to increase. These studies were done by my colleague Susan Engel on curiosity, and what she did is she brought 8 and 9-year-old children in to work with a teacher. The teacher was part of the experiment, and they were doing the bouncing raisins science experiment. So they were adding baking soda and vinegar and putting in different things and letting them dance. And children love to do this, of course. But in 2 groups, the first group, the teacher before leaving modeled curiosity and just said, I wonder what would happen if we put Skittles in there. I have some in my pocket. Here, let's try it. And she modeled furthering the experimentation. And then she left the room. But in the second group, she just did the experiment and then said, okay, let's fill out the worksheet. And then she left the room. The children were 3 times more likely to continue experimenting, to continue learning, if the teacher modeled wanting to be curious and wanting to understand. So not just following the science curriculum, but bringing her own excitement and motivation into the curriculum. was modeling that. And in the second study, the student was the confederate of the experiment. So they had the student pull out something out of their pocket and say, oh, I have M&Ms, let's put them in and see what happens with M&Ms, and deviating from the task. And in one group, the teachers were told, please help the student learn about science and have fun learning about science. But in the second group, the teachers were told, please help the student fill out the worksheet. If they were told to help the student fill out the worksheet, then they were significantly less likely to continue the learning. So it's really important that we're really setting the tone as educators for curiosity. And again, more classic studies, these are kind of from classic learning theory and psychology, that when we put externally imposed deadlines or externally imposed judgment, we really can kill that intrinsic motivation, that it has to come from the learner. Even a reward can disrupt the learner. So then they start doing it they want to get the gold star, right? They're doing well for trying to impress the teacher, trying to impress their parents. And that really kills the intrinsic motivation, the negative impact on reward. I mean, there's a mountain of studies now showing this, and I'm sure you've all heard about this, but yet our school systems are sort of set up with this extrinsic reward. We want a good grade. And as soon as if you can get rid of that in any way, and not fully, because of course we're not in charge always of our schools, but in little ways where you can get children interested. And I've worked with a lot of teachers who just notice, how students react when it's timed or not timed, when it's, this is art class and here are the materials versus this is after school care and do what you want. Same materials, right? Same amount of time, but the creativity.
You're referring to a very interesting point, because like a few weeks ago, I was doing an observation online, and then like every single session, I had the teacher talking about the points, and they are collecting points. And then when I was doing the debriefing, I just put the question for the leadership team. And what if we stop referring to points and we just refer to the learning because we learn, because we are lifelong learners? And it was like, oh, Ali, wow. And you see, so it's very important, because we are still educating for competition and not collaboration. And so the shift from stars and then, getting gifts to let's learn because we are learners, it's a huge one.
It's a completely different part of your brain.
Yes.
So I love to show this. This is Linda Berry. She's a graphic novelist, and she won the MacArthur Genius Award. She's a very now acclaimed graphic novelist, but she talks about these two questions that haunted her in her life. And the two questions are, is this good or does this suck? And the idea is, once you have an outside perspective, it can really harm. She talks about when she was little, that when she would draw, she would get this floating feeling, and that every kid she knew could do it. The lines made the picture made the story, and all these things started happening. But at some point, and she says, I'm not sure when my work became all about, is this good enough? Is this good enough? Is this good enough? But she stopped enjoying it and then instead started to dread it. And we see this happen with children in school too. And we see, what's your favorite subject? And their favorite subject is recess, or they get to be free, they get to explore, they get to be playful. So I want to ask the group, can you imagine a way to assess learning, to understand and help children learn, or help learners without imposing our surveillance, our judgment, our top-down, these things that hurt the motivation?
So while they are answering this question about how do we assess the children learning without imposing or judgment, I have a question for you, Wendy, from Lloyd. And Lloyd is saying, is it fine to set aside a question from a student and leave it hanging? Say, we reserve that question for next week. Or is it better to briefly respond to the student question so we don't kill the curiosity?
Right. It's a great question. I think it's a tough question too, because we're all, as teachers, we're all in this we're all in this kind of improv, right? We don't have our lines for a play. We have to see what happens. And I think sometimes if you wait, especially if you forget, because I've done that, like we'll get to this because I'm on my agenda, and then we forget, that can be very harmful to the student. It sends a message that my agenda is more important than your agenda. And so I think even that little pause can be very powerful to share the space in the classroom, to say, hey, okay, time out. Here's what this student is curious about. Let's go down that path a little bit, not totally derailing the plan, but let's find a middle ground. I think of sort of the Buddhist, the middle path, right?
I think I'm modeling it as well, because I'm getting all these questions and I have to choose which one I embedded in the discussion and which one I will keep it to the end. So let's go back to the assessment without judgment. And then I'm finding interesting answer. So peer assessment can be used to assess the learning. The question of the student that they are asking can be an evidence of the learning. We're having group work would really help, so we can see, we can observe without all the judgment. We use samples, and students will assess this sample based on criteria, agreed criteria, provide feedback. A classroom discussion can be used as a good way to assess the learning. And then if I go to Facebook and all our friends watching on Facebook, we observe them when engaged in different activities and how they connect to the learning in a local and global scenarios. Soha is adding again the observation as a way to assess without judgment.
I'm also thinking, just from some of these ideas, the peer assessment, also the self-assessment can be really powerful, and letting students set the criteria, letting them decide what's going to be measured, how we're going to measure their learning, or come up together with the criteria or the learning outcomes, develop those together as a
I got play. Play is a great tool to observe and understand, open-ended question, drawing, mini inquiry. So
yeah, all wonderful. So many wonderful ideas. And yeah, it's interesting because we already kind of know all of these things. It just, we have
then we still do the test and the exams, and then
right, here's the exam, here's what I wanted. And it can be very freeing for the teacher as well, to not have it so structured and to get surprised. I'm often surprised by what children have learned that was beyond the scope of what I had in mind. So allowing for that. So one last thing I want to just get into a little bit is that curious young learners need time. And if we're on a strict schedule, it's very hard for curiosity to happen, because it's non-linear. It comes out when you least expect it. There's this quote that I love from Rousseau that says, do I dare set forth here the most important useful rule of all education, not to save time, but to squander it. And we've become in a kind of consumer culture where we're checking boxes and we think faster is better, but in fact, faster is not better. Faster is not better for curiosity. It's very fits and starts, right? Great energy, and then lots of time with nothing happening, and there requires a real patience. A lot of teachers are speaking out that there's too much, too soon, too fast. What we used to learn in at age 6 or 7, we're now learning at age 4 or 5. There's this creep for sooner. And the research really doesn't show that that's better. This is a study on reading. Kids who learn to read at age 4 and kids who learn to read at age 7, you look at them later when they're 12 and you can't tell who's who. So the best time to learn to read is when you're dying to learn to read. When you're so excited to learn to read, nothing will stop you. That's when we catch it. It's like catching a wave. And when kids are interested in something, that's when they're gonna get that curiosity brain state. And that's when you're gonna get the best learning. So we also see that with structured and unstructured time. It was the case many, even 20 years ago, 50 years ago, that children got to decide how to spend their time. They got to decide how to spend their afternoon or their days when they weren't in school or summer break. They got to choose. They got to just go outside and see what happens with other kids. But we've increasingly gotten very schedule-y with with kids. Even after school, we have lessons and we have their time scheduled up in a way because we think that that's going to help them with learning. But if you think about learning, you have to get all those skills. You have to learn how to make decisions. You have to learn how to solve problems or prioritize or deciding how to use your time is an incredible skill for a child. If you never have the opportunity to decide how to spend your time, you'll never get good at making those kinds of complex decisions. So in this study, children who had less structured time in their daily lives had better executive functions. And that's the prefrontal cortex. That's all of the things we're looking for in school: problem solving, critical thinking, making decisions, working together, self-regulation. All of those things need practice. You have to practice self-regulating if you want to get good at it. And one of the ways is just letting them be free. And that was something I've really seen during COVID. That's been one of the tragedies of COVID, is that kids were stuck in front of computers all day, and they weren't with other children in many cases. And children learn best from other children. They learn best in that playful complexity with other children. So, and we see it in the brain evidence as well, that place of exploration, motivation, playfulness, comes from loosening up the time frame. And so, how do we do that? Getting into a flow state. You probably all know the work on the state of flow. When you're in this place, we are so into something that you lose complete track of time, and you forget to eat, and you forget to sleep.
This is what happens when I am having these webinars.
You're so excited. And in your brain, I mean, there's so many, there's such a benefit in the brain in that flow state. So we see all of these different parts of the brain being activated when you get in that flow state. It's sort of the ultimate place for curiosity. Now, how can we create something like that in school? We have to be very creative to do that. So how can we open up? This is sort of the last
interaction
thing. And maybe we can put this with the other questions, and should I do that? Should I just finish up and we can open it up?
Yeah, if you want. So, but again, talking about this relation to time, I had a special webinar, Wendy, a few months ago about timetables and how, since the beginning of the school, timetables are very rigid, very structured. And so we looked at different way of breaking the time at the school, looking at it from different perspectives. So, and I always encourage educators and even the leadership team to start looking at timetables from a different perspective, because they were made just to simplify our life as a teacher, but not taking into consideration the learning, the passion, the interest. And so, yeah.
Exactly. And when can you throw out the schedule, right? Like when can you, if someone's really into something, when can you say, oh, actually keep going, you don't have to, or can we mix up? Can some children move on to the next thing, and some children stay and really focus? Because there are different types of attention, and there are different types of ways to focus for children, the spotlight or the broad sense. I'm just wondering if anyone has tried that or worked with different ways of approaching time in the classroom.
I tried again this whole idea of mixing all the primary students. And so we tried it once per week for 10 weeks, where like grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, they were learning together. And then at the end, they had to prepare a kind of a presentation from this whole experience. So I did it on a small scale, but then this idea is just to say if we can do it on a small scale, we can expand it, and we can innovate more, and we can look at things in a different way. We had an example also from a school in Qatar where they had their math teacher, their science teacher, their English teacher, their Arabic teacher at the same time in the classroom with the students.
I love it. It's sort of a one-room schoolhouse in a way.
Yeah, you see.
Wow.
Yeah. Voila. So these are some ideas about time in the classroom. Madiha is saying that having cross-curricular integration are very beneficial, this connection between the disciplines, the teachers. So, yeah. We have
Go ahead.
another question, if you want, from Lloyd. Any interesting teaching strategy supported by research about how we can cultivate curiosity online?
Online. Well, I think from what I've read, most of it is sort of the same principle, which is letting that come from them. And so I have an example from my own children where the students they invented a game using the whiteboard feature on Zoom. And the teacher shut it down. I mean, it was the most interesting part of the whole day, where they actually decided something, they created it, they made rules together, they co-created this amazing learning experience, and they said, no, we're going to turn off the whiteboard now, get back to my lesson. And it seemed like a real missed opportunity, because it seemed like any time we can empower the child to take seriously because they're actually better learners than us. So take seriously their inquiry anytime we can do that. And online, yeah, I think it is a little trickier. It is very.
I have an example, Wendy, also from my own daughter. She like when COVID started, she was in moyenne section, so I need to find the translation, KG1. So she was 4 years old, and she was really enjoying her English class and not the French class, because in the English class, it was all the time, go and find something in your room, go and bring something from the kitchen. And it was very connected to the real life to learn the English. And then with the French, it was like, let's revise our alphabets and sounds. And so I gave a kind of a presentation on this, a webinar on how KG teacher, they've done some learning experiences where they promoted curiosity. We created a Zen garden. We went in the garden to look at the flowers and the plants, and then we had to take photos for the teacher and submit them on an application. So when it was real life, my daughter wanted to do it. And then when it was a kind of a worksheet and you need to submit it, she was like, oh no, I don't want to do this. So this is again, what the teachers are offering the students. And it reflects also the face-to-face, because in the face-to-face, if we are just doing the worksheet, or if we are doing an experiment and then observing, we had to put an egg in vinegar and observe it for 3 days and what will happen to the egg. So this was completely curiosity and developing the
very
curiosity.
Dynamic.
You see?
Well, I think that's why it is, we do lose so much from the Zoom. If I was with, there are 68 participants, I want to see you, I want to meet you, I want to talk, because we may throw out this whole presentation, a discussion that none of us could have predicted. It's surprising. We may have insights that is much more like improv. If you think of it like improv rather than a script, you have to have those tools as a teacher. And I even think that teachers should take improv classes. Police officers, some police officers.
You see, even in theater, like in theater, we teach them how to do improvisation and then how to follow a script. And sometimes the improv is much powerful.
It can be harder, but as a teacher, you have to know when to switch. It's like, oh no, this isn't working. I'm sure all of us have had that moment, right? It's not working. Everyone's bored. I'm bored. Throw it out. Like, what else can we do? Mix it up. Let's go outside. It starts to snow. Let's go outside and have the freedom to do that. That requires the teachers to have a lot of freedom, and a lot of teachers don't. Where I am in the US, very little freedom in the classroom. So we have to subvert. That's what I teach my teachers, to subvert in any way you can. Find any moment of curiosity and engagement in that way. I think.
Good. So we still have approximately 5 minutes, Wendy. We really didn't feel the time. So what do we have next?
I want to show you this plant, this last slide of curiosity as a delicate little plant that needs freedom. And anyway, we can loosen things up a little bit and give them that opportunity, because children are the best learners. They know how to do it. They're good at it. They just need the setting. We just give them the setting and the scaffolding, and they know how to do the rest. And this is the reference list. And I will put that English language learner today. I will send that to Ali. And
yeah, final reflection. So feel free to put in the chat any final reflection. I'm going to share with you again our YouTube channel. On this YouTube channel, if you are new, it's the first time that you are joining us. We have a full playlist about early years educator. And then there is one here, the video that I just mentioned about what my daughter did at her school online from a KG perspective. You have sessions in Arabic, French, or English, different subjects, generic one, specific one. And then you can also check our new website where we are also posting our new events, the face-to-face one or the online ones. So you can also find the asynchronous workshop, the live workshop, face-to-face or online. I'm preparing now all our events for September, October, November. They will be published soon. So we're back to school. We're back to the learning. I hope that you had a nice, relaxing summer break and you are ready for a new academic year. Full of exciting opportunity, yes, challenging one, but this is what makes us human. We try new things, we ask a question, we do research, and then we share this. So Wendy, it was great having you to wrap up our day, and plenty of thank you in the chat. A final word from your side?
yes, thank you all. It's been so wonderful for me to engage in this way, and I would love to continue the conversation with people interested. I'm on Twitter, and I have a website, which is just my name, wendyostroff.com. And so let's continue the conversation and let's continue to change education in an innovative way. Thank
We
you.
stay connected, everyone. It's time for me now to have a break, and we stay connected. Soon we will announce our September day. And let me tell you, we will be talking about action and sustainable development goal from the UN. We are the change. This will be the title of our day in September.
Thank you.